Hey there out in internet land, ladies and gentlemen. This is your friend Charlie Hunter up in Bellows Falls, Vermont. Now, down there in Austin, Texas, Miss Betty Sue is behind the scenes, pulling the strings, doing everything that needs to be done. We're so glad you're here. We're so glad you're here, ladies and gentlemen, because today is a really special Reasonably Fine Art Talk because my dear friend Suzie Baker is joining us. Suzie Baker, welcome to the Reasonably Fine Art Talk.
Hey, Charlie. Yeah, I'm a reasonably fine artist sometimes.
I think you qualify as that. And now, where are you? You're in some funny place in Texas.
North of Houston, a little town called Shenandoah, Texas.
Shenandoah, Texas.
Yeah.
Now, tell us a little about what makes the totality of Suzie Baker.
Oh my gosh, that was one navel gazing. The totality.
Totality of Suzie Baker and how Suzie Baker chose art as her way of moving through life and making sense of this baffling place where we live.
Yeah, I'm probably like a lot of your viewers, listeners. Just always loved art, had to be an artist. When I was going to talk to my guidance counselor at Grant High School in Central Louisiana, she asked if I was going to college, and I said yes. What do you want to major in? Has to be something art related. At first, I thought it was going to be architecture, and then did graphic design. And it was just, I grew up pretty poor, and there wasn't like this path of what it would look like to actually be a vocational artist. Didn't even occur to me. But Louisiana Tech did have a great art department, and I got a lot of great teaching, painting, always painting from life, painting outdoors. We just called it painting. We didn't call it plein air painting. Pictures of me as a teenager that you'll see here in a little bit, and some of my first plein air painting is I'm going to show you.
But did you work as a graphic designer ever, or?
Yes, yeah.
You did.
Right after out of school, I worked as a graphic designer. If there's any graphic designers out there, on my resume were Aldous Freehand, Quark Express, PageMaker, things that just don't exist anymore. Photoshop was around, but they were on my resume like I knew these. But what really was the truth is that the people that were hiring me definitely didn't know them, and I knew them well enough to sort of learn on the job. So it was in that sort of phase. But then we moved to Houston, and I worked as an art director in an ad agency down by the Galleria, and then did that on my own. When I had kids, worked from home doing advertising, but really always oil painted from college, but sort of did advertising, oil painting, and then in 2008 I just sort of flipped that.
And what led to the switch?
We moved to the Middle East with my husband's job to Bahrain, this little country connected by a causeway to Saudi Arabia, and Andy worked in the Middle East in Saudi, and there's nothing like moving across oceans into a different continent to really just have a reset button, and you can do that in your own life too. Just decide you're going to put down all these things that you're busy with. But I had a really convenient excuse, and so I looked for who were the artists on the island. Really, it's a small little country. And you can be really famous in Bahrain very easily because everybody's in everybody's business. But I found some artists, started traveling with artists, just women artists. We went to India and different places. And when I got back home to the Woodlands, Shenandoah area, I thought, let's keep traveling with other artists. And I happened to see a flyer for the Laguna Beach Plein Air Invitational, which I had never heard that such a thing existed. And I was like, what is this? And how do I do it? And it should have been self-evident that invitational means you need an invitation to participate. But I was super naive and, learned that you can apply to some and that sort of thing. But anyway, that was, I did my first plein air event in 2013.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now you do a mix of plein air events and teaching and showing at galleries, just the usual hodgepodge that most of us do to keep food on the table.
Yeah, I just cobble together. And in the beginning, I think if you're just getting started, you just sort of walk through any door that opens to you. I even had, in the very beginning, had an Etsy store where I was basically supporting my habit, of buying the art supplies and paying for the travel.
Right.
And the better you get, the better you do, the more you get into those invitationals, and then you can start being more choosy. Your
Right.
prices go up. We kind of see this pattern, at least in our zeitgeist of the art world. I'm sure it's nuanced different in different parts of the art world,
but yeah, I mean, it is, you walk through or at least the way it seems to work. I agree with you. You walk through the door that is open, and then you look around and see what other doors in this new room are open, and walk through those. It's very gradual, but it's not that hard to. You don't have to be a genius to figure out what the next step is. They do, one opens to another to another. But let's take a look at this zeitgeist, at the totality of what makes Suzie Baker. Why don't we start out with the very first slide? Let's go to the next slide, Betty Sue. There we go.
This is early work.
This is crucial.
It is,
ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, you can see right away that I was, just the talent was there from a very young age.
Yeah, I see you. You have a real grasp of spelling.
Yes. I lick school. I lick Halloween.
Who doesn't?
I know.
All of us lick school and lick Halloween.
Yeah.
And you have a pet named Sowball.
Yeah, that's Snowball. I'm not even sure. I will admit that I am, even to this day, not a great speller. It was particularly obvious, but my handwriting was pretty good. If my handwriting were more messy, you might not notice my bad spelling. Also, I couldn't count spider legs because I believe there are nine legs on that spider, so I wasn't quite observing, live that. It was all from my head, but I learned eventually. So.
Right, and I assume that's a bat over to the right of the.
Well, yeah, it's Halloween, so I'm on point there with my themes.
And the owl is very promising. Yeah. See, it was that you've kept this. Was that owl a something that you got called out on as being an exceptionally good owl? Is that why you still have it?
I'm sure. No, it's something my mom saved, and I was putting together a slideshow about one of these things that you just talk about yourself, which just boggles my mind that people want to hear me talk about myself. But yeah, this was just one of those things in there. I do have an owl memory, one of my earliest art memories. You can tell me what your earliest art memory is. But I was probably in second grade, and we had a coloring page that was an owl, and I got a brown crayon and my green safety scissors because I'm a lefty, and I shaved that brown crayon and I glued it, so it looked like little feathers. And I was very impressed with myself. I'm sure my teacher was just hard eye rolling because I'm sure it was a mess. My entire just littered. Yeah.
That's great. No, that's very good sounding.
Yeah.
Shaving the crayons to make feathers. I never had that sort of imagination. But let's get into the work now. Talk to us.
Yeah. This is college. Yeah, this is that's me as a 20-year-old with a lot more hair. You know what's interesting about this picture? So this is Rome. My college had a Tech Rome program, and this was an independent study where I would just go around. You can see the corner of my grandmother's box there. She was an artist too. And no umbrella, hopefully sunscreen. I've just taped a piece of canvas to a board, and I would carry that box around and sit somewhere. No stool. We feel like the more we spend on our accoutrement, the better we get. And that's the Fountain of the Four Rivers there in Piazza Navona, and that guy he represents the Nile, because I guess when it's Bernini, Brunelleschi, who did the Fountain of the Four Rivers?
I don't know. I don't know.
One of those guys. Yeah.
Well, you could actually say something incorrect and I would have no idea. So you should say a great authority.
Speak with authority.
Arnoloni there. But now I got to say, for college stuff, you've got a really good sense of light dark dynamics and color temperatures. I mean, it's really quite impressive, and I can certainly see the seeds of this of your adult painterly style.
Yeah, I had great teacher, Peter Jones. Again, always painting from life. He took us outside one time with a white styrofoam cup on a white plate in, sort of angling warm sunlight, and said, "What color is that shadow?" And we're all like, "Aha, that shadow is purpley blue." And it's just such a vivid memory. And so color theory but what is not awesome about these paintings is that it's like every little piece could be pulled off like it was a sticker. So, edge work needed some work. But yeah, these are sort of from that Tech Rome trip.
Yeah, but edge work is not one of the things that one innately, or us mere mortals innately come up with. Edge work really, and as you know, when you teach, that's one of the things that is really hardest for people to grasp, is letting go of edges and stuff. So I'm gonna give you a buy on this. I think this is very impressive.
All right.
Now, were these are oils or acrylics?
Oil. I started with oil in college, and I never went back. It was all drawing and acrylic and some pastel and stuff in high school. I had like 4 years. I had great high school art teacher as well. But boy, for me, going from that medium that you can't boss around too much, like acrylic, and of course we did a lot of gouache, but that was all in color theory in college. And now seeing what people do with gouache is astounding. But yeah, getting to the oil and smushing things around was yeah.
Great. Okay, next slide, Betty Sue.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of showing you some of my more recent work, and I pulled out paintings that have been good to me, and this is a plein air piece, even though it's pretty large. But when you do, and I encourage people to do outdoor still lifes, because all those things that are difficult about plein air, you have a little more control when you set up a still life. Your location, you're not as the tyranny of all that information that you have to deal with in a plein air piece. You get a little more control in a still life. So, where you set it up, the lighting and so forth.
But you would still have the challenges that you would have with plein air work, with plein air landscape, in that the light is going to move, so your shadows are going to move.
Right. Yeah. That watermelon would have had 3 or 4 shadows, doing a little sundial, involved. But
and the other thing I find more difficult about painting a plein air still life as opposed to a plein air landscape is the most minute shift of my head in relation to the subject changes the composition so greatly. Whereas if I'm looking at, across a field, it's my moving around slightly is not going to change the composition much.
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought of that.
Okay. Oh, it drives me crazy. That's why I don't do those darn
one-eyed.
still lives.
Just you use one eye. Wear your eye patch when you paint the still life.
All right. Okay. Let's look at the next one. This is a swell painting. I was around for this one. Was this a Forgotten Coast painting?
Yeah, this was the first year of COVID. Everything just shut down, and Forgotten Coast was kind of the first to go virtual, really. Right. With how do we not just ruin our year and not have an event at all. So they did this thing where, actually, I didn't read the instructions very well. So they were going to provide a bunch of photos. And then for the quick paint, we had access to the photos for about 30 minutes. And so I was in the midst of also taking care of my dad, who was going through cancer. And I was on his back porch, and I had gone and collected stuff for this. I like to do these sort of seafood outdoor still life things. So I called Denise and I said, hey, can I just make these photos available to everyone? And so quite a few people painted this low country boil. But one of the things I learned painting these sort of seafood, if I'm in a seafood place like Easton, Maryland, or Galveston or Florida, one of the things I learned is that every place does it a little differently. If you're in Louisiana, it's just all crawfish. You wouldn't see shrimp. But you would see the potatoes and corn and sausage.
Huh.
In Easton, Maryland, it's just crabs.
Right.
They don't put anything else in, and they have gherkin pickles and Ritz crackers inexplicably, but that's the way they do things. So
how long did this painting take?
Yeah, so quick paints are, I can't, quick paints are usually an hour and a half to 2 hours, and I can't remember how Forgotten Coast did theirs. But what was really sweet about this is that my dad, he knew I was an artist, but I don't think he really had a concept of what I did and how it worked. And so here I am sitting on his back porch, and there via Facebook or checking in with the artists all around different places. And my dad was sitting there and saying hi to people and stuff. And then I ended up, winning an award with this one and selling the painting. And my dad's comment was, he said, you couldn't have made more money if you had robbed a convenience store. So I chose the right career, apparently. Yeah, convenience
store. Walking over Circle K's, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
The thing I'd like to point out, though, to the viewers on this is what a sophisticated design this is. Because this is, Larry Moore and I were talking last week about abstraction and how, all of what we do really is an abstraction. And this is if you put away the idea that these are lemons and potatoes and shrimp and crawfish, it's just a wonderful movement of color and pattern. The newspaper providing the brightest brights, and then the shadows being a delicious kind of unifying tone throughout. It's a lovely, lovely painting. I'm amazed that you did it in a couple of hours. It's really great work, Suzie.
Thanks. When I do things like this, and you'll see a few more where my design idea is really not about a focal point, but it's about moving your eye from place to place and making sure, Lori Putnam would say, don't make stupid shapes. Like all of those little negative shapes and spaces in between, they can't be too monotonous or chaotic, so what I am thinking about is how do I move things around? And then also these pieces have a whimsy to them. And so letting that whimsy come through, and then kind of the last little things, there would be the scratches of the antennae, or I'm not sure what they're called on shrimp and crawfish, but I sort of save that for last to sort of either paint on or scratch out, but to continue that idea.
Yeah, well, and certainly people are commenting about what a successful painting it is. And last thing I'll point out before we move on to the next one is that the intensity of the negative spaces of the newsprint increases in the center section. So you may say that you don't have an absolute focal point, but you are directing the eye with the intensity of the brightness in the kind of center passage of the painting.
Yeah, and the way the crawfish on the top points into that area as well, and and that he is more realized than the one that's sort of falling off the canvas there where my signature is.
Yeah.
And even in the top right too, like the attention that some of those things get is not the same. And you'll see I've got a cherry piece coming up, and you'll see that same thing coming into play on that one.
All right, next slide then, Betty Sue.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Okay. Now this must be Door County, since I see it says Lautenbach cherries.
Yeah, yeah. This was me getting a clue my 3rd year in Door County that if you paint apples on the tree, they don't sell. But if you paint cherries on the tree, they do, because you're in Door County. And yeah, so like if you were standing there looking up into the branch with me, you would not see this exact composition. You know, I borrowed. So if the first still life that you saw was, you know, completely controlled by me, including purchasing those items, setting them up, cutting the watermelon, you know, making that sort of a composition and leading you in with that watermelon. This one is in situ. You know, this is up in the tree. I'm not moving things around per se, but I'm looking and I can grab things and move them around. And just like the crawfish, those negative spaces need to do that job of not being too monotonous, not being too chaotic, but giving that resting place for that, the busyness of the cherries. And you know, obviously that leaf in the middle that's really realized next to those really vibrant cherries, as opposed to really any of the others, some that almost disappear entirely and are just implied with a little color. Yeah, I think when we first start painting, we paint up to the edge and everything is very detailed. And the more you do, the more you start thinking about how the eye actually looks and what's really important and how do I want to bring the eye, and those other things don't have to be as fully realized. So
absolutely. And the fact that you do have those, like the 2 leaves in basically the center of the painting are the most realized leaves. Mm-hmm. Then to the right of those 2 leaves are a mass of leaves which are close to a uniform tone, mm-hmm. kind of scumbled paint, but they are just the outer form. You're not differentiating between each individual leaf. And that contrast, I'm not sure how cognizant the viewer is when just casually looking at the painting, but that difference in how finished an area of the painting is directing where the eye is going, and it makes for a successful and interesting painting as opposed to just a mediocre. Mary Beth Belton's hearts the paint textures and the composition. So Mary Beth Belton has no flies on Mary Beth Belton.
And I think if I were trying to paint this in the studio from a photograph, I'd probably beat the hell out of this. You know, I would overthink it, but the reason that we paint, well, and also all of those shadows would go right black, and the bright blue sky would have been blown out in a photograph. So, you know, even if you're not a plein air painter, and you know, just going out and putting yourself through those paces so that you, practice painting faster. You know, I get in my studio and I have the tendency to, I've got all the time in the world, and you know, and so now the freedom of a piece like this, I know would have the tendency to get constipated, you know.
Right.
Yeah, so I try to set limits and back away more, and just not let myself lose that that alla prima feel.
Right. Well, it's another beautiful work. Next slide, please, Betty Sue. Now, where the hell is this? Is this Easton?
No, this is Rockport, Texas, right after a really bad Hurricane Harvey came through, and this was one of those situations. And I like to show this one after I show still lifes, because, you know, how is this not like a still life? You know, it's just a lot bigger. And rather than me placing those boats, I place myself in relationship to those boats. And this was one of those situations where I saw it and I was just so excited, like, ooh, you know, I can't wait to get my easel up and start painting start painting this. And yeah, this has been a good painting for me. So.
In what way, when you say a painting has been a good painting for you?
Well, I got a best of show and an artist choice for this it was Outdoor Painters Society. They do their event down in Galveston now. It's a really good event for if you feel like you want to start doing plein air events, but you're intimidated by it. There's a variety of the professional to the person just getting into plein air events, and that's Outdoor Painters Society, which is they're based in Texas, but people from all over. Richard Sneary does it. John Lasseter has been there a number of times, and yeah. So, but it's a as far as intensity, if you're looking for a show to do, it's a good one, and I think applications are open now for this.
This is very generous of you, Suzie, to kind of be taking people through venues and opportunities that they might consider. I appreciate your doing that. That's ladies and gentlemen, Suzie has also been head of, was it Oil Painters of America for the last couple of years?
Yeah, I was. I am the immediate past president right now, as the official. Doesn't roll off the tongue as easily as president, but yeah, OPA is a great, or Oil Painters of America. It's a wonderful organization. Just really, yeah. If you want to see where the bar for representational painting is in the U.S. right now, go to an OPA show, a national show. We're going to be out in Charleston in right leading up to April Fool's Day. So put that on your calendar and come see the show.
All right. Now, and Jeff Eichhoff just
welcome, Jeff.
Welcome, Pilgrim, as they say. Next slide, please, Betty Sue. Hey, I recognize Dan Marshall there. There's that totally, you nailed Dan Marshall there just beautifully.
Yeah.
With so little, that's so amazing, that painting.
That was my favorite painting of 2019, and the reason is when you do Laguna Beach plein air invitational, you turn in all your work one morning, they give you a nice breakfast, and then you're just sort of on your own recognizance with the other artists. And a lot of us will go down to Main Beach and we're just shooting the breeze, jumping in the water, getting out paints. We were painting along with Dan Mondalak. He was helping us as oil painters do some it's just fun. It's just a fun day. And Dan sets up, and I just, it's a little 8x8 painting. So, when you don't have the pressure, sometimes you do some of your best work. And so Dan's host actually bought this painting for him and gave it to him for Christmas, and he didn't know it was coming. So he got that. And so I love that. I love that he has this painting, and yeah.
What a considerate thing on the part of the host.
Yeah. I think they'd been his host for a number of years, and yeah, that was very generous. And then the painting there on the left is just it. When you do plein air, and that was a quick paint, it doesn't always have to be landscapes. And when I first started getting started in the art career, I didn't know if I would go to the Portrait Society, and I didn't know which fork I would take, and ended up doing more of the plein air route. But our careers don't always stay in the same spot, so anyway, I love doing portrait figure work, and this is how I incorporate that into a quick paint.
Well, I see some of that old bravura brushwork going on there, where it's that, I think of it as kind of the palette and chisel school of portrait painting, of doing those kind of washes with the drips and the brush strokes, and then building the painting kind of on top of those.
I've taken some workshops with Clayton Beck, and he's palette and chisel, and grumpy old Clayton Beck, but he's a wonderful teacher. And Charlie, this is one of those paintings though that when all the stars align and things just start flowing off your brush. And I remember at one point I'd done something and the audience kind of gasped, and I'm thinking, oh man, I just don't screw this up, Suzie. Oh gosh.
Absolutely.
Not as easily.
Don't look down. Don't look down. Right.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Next slide, please, Betty Sue. Oh, this is beautiful. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, this is out. So this is actually a Laguna Beach plein air invitational painting, but occasionally I will veer off of the beach. And this is out at Casper State Park. I had been seeing paintings that, the likes of John Cosby and um, Ray Roberts would do these really great, more canyony type things. So I kind of went out looking for one of those. But when I am at a plein air event, I will have an idea of what I want to paint and start heading that direction. But I'll hold it with an open hand in case I see something that really sparks my interest. In this backlit sun behind the sycamore was the idea of this painting. And I show this one because it's a 20 by 24, which is a rather large size to try to be executing in plein air. And just the way you approach something like that is you start with the thing that's going to change the fastest, and which is going to be all that backlit leaves. So I started with a very bright tone in that acidy green, and then because then those shadows and things you can pull from later, but the light's going to change the fastest. So
interesting.
This painting is available, by the way.
this painting is available, ladies and gentlemen, and I guess at the end we'll be discussing how one could find it.
Yes.
But compositionally, by having the eye is being drawn to the base of that tree, because the shadows are pointing to the base of the tree and the tree itself is pointing to the base of the tree. It's wonderful to have it, and you've got that burst of light down there in that lower right hand quadrant. So it's interesting how you are playing with how the eye moves around in this one as well. You do a lot of that. You're really aware on paintings of yours, Suzie, how the eye is being told, how the eye is being gently led along by the decisions you've made about where it is going to go. You're really a master of that.
Oh, thanks. I think that comes from the advertising background, because we weren't taught in the concept of advertising or page design that the rule of thirds. We were taught negative space, moving the eye around, not cramming things too full. If there's any graphic designers listening to us, the inside joke is the client always wanting their logo bigger and more text. And we're always trying to less is more. I can lead your eye to that logo. We can say more that the viewer is going to read more, but particularly the more technical, maybe it's a banker or a scientist, they want to load that too much information. And, the rest of us that are artists, we're probably on the other side. We don't read, we just want to look at pictures. So.
Right. Well, beautiful work and available, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep.
Next slide, please, Betty Sue. Oh, there's that top one. That's the one I voted for as artist's choice for or best landscape. Some one of the damn things we had to vote for at Smokies this year. But that was from the Smokies, right?
Yes, that is the Smokies. And two of my favorite paintings I came home with, from the Smokies, and this is one of them. So also available. But, when I come home with some of my favorite work, I don't get too worked up, because I'm like, well, I can enter it into something. And I put these two on this one side because these long, thin, that's a 10 by 30 and a 6 by 30, not a standard size, but something that really appeals to me. So I get these panels made and frames made, which is more work, but it interests me. I don't know if it's growing up in the South where all landscapes are sort of horizontal and, it's just all the land is down here and then it's sky. But I find them calm. and appealing. And I think also that if you are a collector and you have filled your walls with, they can squeeze in a 6x30 somewhere.
They really would be able to squeeze in a 30x6, but that would be very, unless it was a painting of a palm tree,
Yeah.
you're really out of luck on that.
I have when during COVID, I painted the pine tree in my backyard, learned a lot about pine trees. But I did that it was a little 5x18, I think, and it was long. And somebody had a spot right between two doors, that little space, and they were,
That's what we got to be thinking about. Some of these art events, ladies and gentlemen, you wonder how they can survive, like Laguna, because doesn't everybody in Laguna Beach now have enough paintings of the beaches at Laguna? But they still are buying them. But we're thinking about the spaces between two doors and the space above a light switch. I mean, we've got to be thinking about that these days.
Yeah, people love Main Beach, Heisler Park. It didn't surprise me that I ended up coming home with that, the Casper's Park. It appealed to me. I'd probably already done 8 beach paintings, and I needed a palette cleanser. But people buy Main Beach.
Yeah.
And I came home with that one. So.
Well, this painting, the top painting, Great View Sunset, just in person, it just knocked me out, because the sense of space in it, even though it's only 10 inches high, it's just vast. And then the brushwork is so beautiful and so reminiscent of kind of early 20th century American landscape. It has that confidence in the mark making that I found a stunning painting. And also, again, the way that it bursts out from the right-hand quadrant. It just expands. It starts with that the stitching of the foreground and the background on the extreme right, those 3 verticals that you've got cutting through the light area. And then the light area of the field building out and building out and building out, and then it explodes into the mountains and the blue passage in the middle area. Just a consummate painting, I think.
Thanks. Well, very definitely inspired by that California Impressionist feel, Child Hassam and Kairos, William Wendt. But also, I've been looking at a lot of the Australian Impressionists now, the Sydney and I got to remember some of their names. I have their books around here somewhere. But this painting, just for your painters that are watching, if you went and stood where I sat, you would not see this exact scene. I'm borrowing, I needed those 2 trees on the left to stop you from just heading right off. Think of it as sort of a bookend. The shadow in the foreground is contrived so that you step over that and into the painting. And then the other thing that you wouldn't see is technically you wouldn't see that chartreuse cutting light on the green grass at the same time as you would see those mountains looking purple. They would, or orangey and blue. So when you're out painting in plein air, I was using what was in front of me to inform my choices, but kind of choosing what I thought was going to make the painting as opposed to being entirely faithful. Because nobody's going to know that you moved those trees or that rock didn't quite look like that. Or, I'm constantly putting in, like in the painting on the bottom, the little century plant there with the spiky leaves that point up into and break the horizon.
On the extreme right-hand side?
On the extreme right-hand side. I'm constantly sticking things in like fence posts or things that'll stop you, they're just little design devices,
Right. In essence, you're using the same design device on the right-hand side on these 2 paintings. Mm-hmm. You've got the century plant stitching between the foreground, the far background, and the sky. And on the top painting, you've got the shadow area stitching between the shadow in the foreground and the trees in the background. It's it's the same device, but it's a very effective device because it does keep the eye from running off on one side of the painting.
Yeah,
And
which you would really want to do on these long paintings where everything is like horizontal. And this is, again, why you should paint from life, because in a photograph, it bosses you around too much. But we have this thing called a neck where you can pivot and you can grab things from over there, get that cherry and bring it down.
But now I would also caution listeners that Suzie gets to move things around because she's painted a lot. She could paint it the way it is, but she is making these informed decisions. Just because your painting is not going well does not mean that you get to make things up. It's like the old, you need to know the rules before you can break them.
Yeah, I heard Charles Mavali give a talk before he passed away, I guess within the last 5 years or so.
I heard him give a talk after he passed away, but it was pretty.
Oh, really? That was amazing. Wow.
You go.
Like Ghost of Christmas Past for Charlie. And he was saying the same thing, rules and principles are for this. Well, he said it with like this, with the New York accent. He said the rules and principles are for the student. I think of it as like the bumpers in the bowling alley, that's to kind of keep us safe and and then you can start breaking those rules a little bit. Like those cherries, they were the main squeeze cherries were right in the middle of the painting. But because they were so connected by the other things that would move your eye, it wasn't making that bullseye that would hold your eye.
Right.
So.
Right. Okay. So Edward is saying Australia, Tom Roberts, Arthur Streeton, Charles Condor, John Russell. All right. I've got a lot to learn. And that makes sense that there is that whole tradition of Australian Impressionism, because you look at Leon Holmes and Leon is that nice juicy painting style as well.
Yeah.
And endearingly Australian. Next slide, please, Betty Sue.
Yeah, this is another one of the Smoky Mountain things, which I just want to say to all of the professional artists out there, don't apply. Yeah, it was not a good event. No, it was great. It was a great first ever Smoky Mountain plein air event.
The thing that was hilarious about that event, at least I thought, was that when we did the quick paint, which are the early events where there were paintings for sale, nothing was selling, and like nothing sold at the quick paint. It was raining and horrible out, but I think there was a feeling amongst all of us of like, oh my Lord, what if we put ourselves in for this beautiful event that nothing is going to sell? And then once the doors opened at the gala, it was a feeding frenzy. It was
area. Yeah. Yeah, it was great. Yeah. But when something really great goes like that and you get to be one of the first artists to do it, you're like, oh man, word's going to get out.
Absolutely.
We'll have a lot of applicants this year.
Now, one of the challenges for painting at the Great Smokies was that if you were not a water, rock, and tree painter, it was kind of challenging because there are a lot of trees and there's a lot of water and a lot of rocks there.
Yes.
So this your palette here, it's a very interesting palette because it was pretty much a green tunnel during full daylight hours. And this, you've got these kind of roses and violets happening in the background.
This was such a great scene. Breanne Brown and I drove down this road that we had heard about, and it was so cold. And being next to the water made it even colder. And I think if we didn't have each other egging ourselves on, like, okay, this is a great place to paint. Just, buck it up and so this was an 18 by 18, and but that light coming through and making that brilliant orange on the water there. If I get invited back, I will probably go to the same place and turn the other direction because it was just as beautiful that direction as well.
But what beautiful depth you get on this. I mean, the eye just really travels so deep in this little 18 by 18 inch area. Beautiful work, Suzie. Next slide, please, Betty Sue. San Angelo train station. Yes. So Plein Air, this is Plein Air, Texas. This was this year.
Yeah, these last two pieces are, I put them kind of back to back because talk about painting, going to one place and painting two different things. So I sort of, I think a minivan or any SUV that has a hatch is like one of your best art supplies. So I back into this place, I lift my hatch, and looking east is this, looking west is the painting that you'll see next. And this is another example of for me, this is a challenging bit of drawing. And it's a rather large for a plein air piece. And it's a very fleeting time of day. So to do a 12 by 24 with all of those situations, the strategy for me is scope it out one day, see what the light's doing, show up the next day a few hours prior to this situation, get all the drawing and the massing in done, make some color notes, and then the third day you go back and finish it. And the benefit was that I could back in and see this one direction and the other another, meant that I could kind of do that twice.
So you could get two paintings out of a 3-day.
Yeah, out of one situation. And I've also learned too that I don't just paint an it'll do painting because I'm anxious to paint something. I wait until there is something that really inspires me. In fact, I thought this gets really pretty too in about 45 minutes when it's at dusk time, after sunset. Things are very purple and those lights start to come on, and that's the time of day I thought I was going to paint. Mm-hmm. And then on the third day, everything was masked in, and then those beautiful clouds came in. And so
interesting. So you end up with more of the golden hour as opposed to the twilight hour. Yeah. Now, right. Why this is called past and present?
Well, just because San Angelo has this great train museum, and this certainly represents old Americana, the Charlie Hunter Americana of the train and the bygone era, but they're still celebrating it even now. So, so that's why.
Okay. That's good enough. Next slide, please, Betty Sue. So this is looking the other direction. Oh, that's getting your twilight hour there, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the other direction. And again, I had painted this painting, and when I painted it, it was just sort of one solid sky shape with some broken color where it shifted hue, but not value. And then we get that really beautiful cloud thing happening. So the clouds changed from one to the other. So, yeah.
Now, one thing I would like to point out to viewers is that if I've painted this scene not as well as this, because I got all hung up on trying to get the rails exactly right. You're talking about in this painting, you're talking about what the light on those rails feels like, as opposed to obsessing about getting every bit parallel on its way to the vanishing point at the curve. And I think it's tremendously effective. You're supplying. You're saying to the viewer, this is what it felt like there. You're not saying this is literally absolutely everything I saw. It's such a beautiful simplification, and your massive shapes in that tone against the sky is so, the eye just dives in there and just loves looking at all that beautiful variety of shape. Wonderful painting, Suzie.
Thanks. Yeah, when I see things like this or things that are busy, like those cherries, or what I tell myself in my head is that I need to tell the truth, but not the whole truth. And And then that combined with something that I heard Jill Carver say one time was that in a competition among your peers, it's the idea that wins the day. And the idea is not this sort of urban train landscape, but it's about light. And so that those train tracks are catching that light, that they're bouncing back up the thing that is in the sky. That's what this painting is about more than train tracks per se. It's about that time of day and the light. And if you choose a motif at the beginning of your painting, Don DeMere said one time, sometimes he's a marine painter, very well-known master OPA artist. And
he's one of my favorite painters. He's a great painter.
Yeah, good guy too. And
he said, jerk that guy is.
He's probably watching right now, and he said sometimes he will name a painting before he paints it. So if he's going to paint a wave and he's going to call that painting Crescendo, but then the ocean flattens out while he's painting, it better crescendo at the end of the painting as much as it did at the beginning of the painting. So carrying that motif through. So those three things I kind of keep in mind when I get tempted to sort of chase every new idea that comes up.
Yeah, I agree with Beth. I mean, the scale of this, it's the Mona Lisa is a tiny painting. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be a big painting to be a big painting. So.
And I could put the Mona Lisa right in front of this. I mean, it's very background for.
Very good. Next slide, please, Betty Sue.
Yeah, I think this is my last
one last thing. Let's go back to that Australian painter, Betty Sue, that comment you threw up. A great Australian artist of landscape, Richard Musgrave, for me is exceptional. Okay, there's some names. I'm going to have to rewatch this and write these names down. I'm
going to write that one down right now because I have sort of a book that is a compilation. And
So Suzie Baker. If people want to learn more about the totality that is Suzie Baker, would the thing be that they should go to SuzieBaker.com?
Yes, Charlie, I can't believe you thought to ask that. But yeah.
What will they find there, Suzie?
Well, I have been updating my website. Actually, I finally threw in the towel and hired someone to start doing sort of the back end things. So updating my website, getting things. So it's pretty user friendly, and I've got a whole available section on my website. But then there's also upcoming events if you want to see where I'm going to be, where I'm going to be teaching. And then there's a little for painters section where there's some videos, some quick paint videos, links to articles, things like that for you guys.
That's wonderful. That is wonderful. Now, what workshops do you have coming up?
I have one at the booth that will be coming up in March. And that's down in the Atlanta area. I'll be one of the faculty at Plein South, which is right before Forgotten Coast, though that's probably already filled up.
Right. That's only like 75 to 85 people.
Yeah, with some faculty. Yeah. But then going from that right to Forgotten Coast. Last year was my first year to do it in person. That's a wonderful event.
Oh, it's a great event. They fired me this year. They were like, oh no, it's fine. I've done it for like the last 8 years. And they're like, we love you, but maybe it's time to swap out, get some new people in. And I was like, you're absolutely right. But boy, it is a wonderful, wonderful event. So anyway, so I urge people to visit SuzieBaker.com. Thank you so much, Suzie. This was great to catch up with you and to look at your wonderful work and hear a bunch of your thought process that goes into it.
Yeah, I like hearing what artists are thinking when they're, like you get the teaching, like the composition, design, color theory and stuff, but like what's actually controlling and making them make that particular decision in that painting. And I enjoy hearing that so I can then steal those ideas and use them myself. So.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you, Suzie. Thank you all for watching. Everyone take good care. We'll be back next week and see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.